Ois Daled. So now we explained the difference between the shofar Godel and the regular shofar that we blow on Rosh Hashanah. And the shofar Godel is a great gilui in order to impact also those who are lost and nidochim, and that's without isarusa dilatata. The Rebbe is going to ask now that technically in the Mameorim we associate the blowing of the shofar today with the blowing of yitaka b'shofar Godel that will be on its own, and we know that the whole idea of Rosh Hashanah is the avodas hamato, that it is the avodas ha'odom. And here we're saying that the level of shofar Godel is a level of that comes by itself. And what is the lesson for the person if it comes by itself? Let's look inside. It's explained in the beginning of this Maimer, after the questions that we have on Shefer Godel Yevitoka, there it says, Zeh she'emrim b'Rosh Hashanah zeh hayoim tchilas masacho. Why are we saying that this is the beginning of Hashem's action? Meaning, beginning of creation, even though it's already the sixth day of creation. Why is it the first day of creation? Who kibichol Rosh Hashanah, who is havus kol ha'ilamis mechodosh k'moy shehoyu b'pam rishonah. Because every Rosh Hashanah there is the creation of all the worlds as it was anew, like it was the first time. So we're going through whatever happened the first time is happening now. The difference is that the first time around when Hashem really created in the beginning, it didn't come mitzad avodas ha'odom. But now the Eibishter Chofetz Chesed, the Eibishter created the world without the Isarusa Dilatato. But now it's a Zikorin Liyem Rishon. It's the beginning of creation because this creation hinges on man. The Avodas Ha'odom on Rosh Hashanah brings about again the recreation, but it's only a reminder to the Yom Rishon. Umashekosu Zikorin Liyem Rishon. Why do we say it's only a reminder of Yom Rishon, but it's not like the Yom Rishon? Sherosh Hashanah Hurak Zikorin Liyom Rishon. Why is it only a reminder of Yom Rishon? Who? The reason is Ki B'tchilas Habriya, because in the beginning of creation, Hamshochas Harotzin v'Hatainug B'Briya So'ilomis Hoysum Mitzadatzmai. Bringing the extending of the Eibishter's will and delight in creation of the worlds was on its own. And now, Ki Chofetz Chesedu, that came because of the Eibishter wants Chesed, so on his own he created the world. But v'achshav b'sarusa dilatato talya milsa, but now it depends on the arousal of below. So we have to do avodas ha'odom. So it's a reminder of Yom Rishon, but it's not like the Yom Rishon. Zeh Yom Tchilas Masecha because it's the avodas ha'odom. It's not mitzad chofetz chesed. It's mitzad the avodah sarusa dilatato of the mato. Umevayer, and he explains in the Maimer שהavoida isarusa dilatato shal yodo mamshichim harotzim v'atainug b'briyas ha'olam ha'isi. What is the avoida? What is the sarusa dilatato through which we bring down the Eibishter's want and delight in the creation of the world? He kimayim razal. That's as our sages of blessed memory say. Say before me the verses of making Hashem a king, say the verses of remembrance, as we do in the Musaf, Obameh shofar, and then you blow the shofar through the psukim malchis, zichronis, and the shofars, and then we blow the shofar. That's the avodah which draws down the rotz and tanik b'risoila. That's how we bring it down. So we have an avodah to do to bring it down, as opposed to in the beginning, and that's why it's only a remembrance to what it was in the beginning. But zayim tchilas masecha, we bring it down through avodah. So what's the reason, Take, that now when we bring it down, we extend all the rotzen and tainug? It has to be through the work of man. Because through the fact that now the hamshocha comes through the work of the Yidden. The Shoirish Yisrael hu beha'atzmus. And the root of Yidden is in Atzmus. So when we do it, because our Avodah, we actually bring down a higher level of Rotzav v'Tainuk from Atzmus, not only from the level of Chofetz Chesed. HaRotzav v'Tainuk, shenimshochim achshov, the desire, the want, and the pleasure that extend now into the world's creation, Heimnalim Yoiser, they are on a higher level. We bring down a higher level of Rotzav v'Tainuk, Rotzav v'Tainuk, shenimshochu mitzad atzmam b'tchilas habriya. They're on a higher level than the Rotzav and the Tainuk that were extended on their own in the beginning of creation. So, based on this, we have to understand that the shofar de la Mailo, that the level of the shofar from above, which is the Pnimius Rotzen Elyon, Shenimshech Achshov, that we bring down now through the Avodah, Shehu Shofar Stam. That is a plain shofar. And how do we get that? Hamshachosehi al yidei avodas ha'odam. That comes through avodas ha'odam. Zehayim tchilas masecha, when we the avodah malchis zichrenis b'meh b'shofar. That's the avodah. So that is a regular shofar. B'shofar, the osid lovish, shofar Gdol. But then the shofar lost love, which is the shofar Gdol, which is a higher madrega, which is a maser drega of shofar Gdol that needs to be from such a high place so it can also arouse those ovdim and nidachim. Yumshach ma'atzme bli asarusa deletato klal. That's going to come without any sarusa deletato. So how could it be? Here we're bringing down the level of Atzmus is through Avodah. Avodah Sa'odam. Zehayim Tchilas Masecha, through Avodah Sa'odam. It's a Zikaron L'Yem Rishon, which it came on its own, the Yom really by creation. And this is, we call a shofar stop. And then we have the shofar Gdol comes without Avodah. Here, the Maila of Avodah is that it taps into the Shoresh of Yisrael. How could that be Yitaka without the... And the Rebbe says further that these two shofars that we do on Rosh Hashanah is associated with the shofar that would be lost in Lovei. And again, the same issue. The whole idea of shofar on Rosh Hashanah is Avodas Ha'odam, and if Tekiyah, the shofar Gdol, is similar, connected to the shofar that we're blowing today, how is that done without any sarusa? How is it done only from above? So, how do we connect this shofar that we do with avodah, the shofar stam, to with the shofar gadol, which is yitaka on its own, and we connect it to Rosh Hashanah. V'hinei mevayer b'hamaimer. The Maimer explains the zeh le'osi lova yitaka b'shofar gadol, that when we say in the future to come it's going to be blown in a great shofar, hu al derech shofar the Rosh Hashanah achshav, that's similar to the shofar of that we blow today, Rosh Hashanah. Ki mitzvahs einon betelus la'osi lova, meaning the mitzvahs will not be stopped in the future to come, which means we'll continue to do mitzvahs. Just like we're blowing the shofar now, we're also going to be blowing the shofar when lost in Lavai. So, what does it mean that it's going to be Yitaka? It's going to be shofar gadol, but it's a continuation of the shofar that we blow on Rosh Hashanah. But it's going to be b'shofar gadol. Elo sha'oz yih ha-shofar b'madrega nailis yaser. But then the shofar will be on a higher level, shofar gadol. Yeah, and the Rebbe would say, will ask if it's a continuation, but today it comes with Sarusa de Latata, so why is it Yitaka? But the Rebbe brings down what is the source to connect the shofar that we blow on Rosh Hashanah to Yitaka b'shofar gadol. This is a pasuk in Yeshaya which talks about what's going to be lost in love. And here we're talking about the mitzvah of blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Who says they're connected? The Rebbe brings a proof, a source to this connection. Yesh loymar shahamokir lozeh. What is the source for this? Shayitaka b'shofar gadol shayich l'tkiyas shofar Rosh Hashanah. This blowing in the big shofar is connected to the blowing of the shofar of Rosh Hashanah. Huma de'isa b'gemara is from what we find in the Gemara. In the Gemara, there's a machlokes when the Geula in the future will come, whether it will come on Tishrei or it will come in Nisan. And the opinion that says it will come on Tishrei, the timer shall hamanda omar betishrei. The reasoning for the opinion that says that Tishrei asidim lehigoyel, that they're going to be redeemed. So the Gemara says, "Who asya shofar shofar." We learn a gzera shofar shofar. Why? Ksiv hacha tiku b'chei the shofar. Over here it says, "Blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah." Ksiv hasam bayom ההוא יתקע b'shofar גדול. And over there the verse says that it will be blown a shofar gadol. Shofar shofar. It means the shofar gadol will come. The tiku b'chei the shofar. So we see very clearly the connection that the shofar that gadol is connected to the shofar that we blow on Rosh Hashanah. So so based on this, we need to understand the question we asked before: the connection between Yitaka by itself with the avodah of the shofar. If this is a shofar that we blow on Rosh Hashanah, that's the shofar gadol. Why is it blown on its own? Why is there no avodah? So according to this, that this is actually a continuation of this shofar blowing we blow today. From this is going to be lost in love in a shofar gadol. So we need to understand even more this that we brought down from the Mameorim. The pirush yitaka. What is the meaning yitaka when you have the tov bekomat? Yitaka will be blown b'shofar gadol. We talk about atzme b'li yisurusa dilatato klal, that it will be blown on its own without the arousal of below at all. How could that be a Rosh Hashanah dike shofar when Rosh Hashanah is mainly avodas adam? Inyan im ha'ikrim de Rosh Hashanah. The main aspects of Rosh Hashanah is avodas adam, is the service of man. That's one of the main key ideas of Rosh Hashanah. Okevur bekama mekaymes dahatam al zeh, as explained in many places, that the reason for the fact Sheresh Hashanah hu be'echad b'Tishrei, why is it on the first day of Tishrei? Av shebechofei be'elul nivra ha'olam. Even though the world was created on the 25th day of Elul, uh, be'echad b'Tishrei hu yom shishi, and this first day of Tishrei is actually the sixth day of creation. Hu ki b'yom zeh nivra ha'adam, because on this day man was created. So that's why man's creation is what is the uh, birthday of the world, the creation again, because we need Avodas Adam. Without the person, there's no creation. The Avodas Adam creates. We said before, L'chatchila says the Kornei Rishon. Bekiv on the Inyan Yitaka b'Shefer God la derech tika b'chei the Shefer. Since the blowing in this great shofar is similar to blowing the shofar during Rosh Hashanah, the Rosh Hashanah Tishrei, uh, which means that it has to do with Avodas Adam. That's the Taka b'Shefer God. This should be through the service of man, man's involvement. And still in the Mameorim, we explained the Pirush Yitaka Ma'atzmai, B'li Isarusa Dilatata Klal, that Yitaka means it's blown on its own, meaning there's no Isarusa Dilatata. It just comes Milmaila, Yitaka B'Shefer. So how can we reconcile this with the fact that this is a continuation of Rosh Hashanah, whose idea is Avodas Adam Lamato, that Gam Tzarech Lahavin. Also, we need to understand this thing that it'll be blown on its own. So, if there's no involvement of the person there, so how is it Taki that we're saying that uh, it's on its own? So, how does this a lesson? What are we supposed to do with this if it's nothing to do with us? Come from it's a lesson. It's a lesson that we have to do, what we have to service. Here we're saying this is not a service, it's by its own. Since this, that it's going to be blown in a shefer godel is going to be on its own without this Latato, so what's the lesson from this in service of man? What can we learn from this? You talk about Shefer Godel when it has nothing to do with man; it comes all from above. And the Rebbe is going to explain now that while this is all Yitaka, it's on its own, but really it comes because of the situation of man. The Rebbe is going to explain when a person is in a way of Meitzar, when a person is in a way of humility, then the Merchav comes Kilo on its own. When we talk about the idea of Shofar, it's Taki you talk about Shofar Godel, but it is still connected to the person's level and situation, which brings about the Yitaka b'Shofar Godel, as the Rebbe will explain. Hey, Yuvan Zapi Amavur B'Drushad Murmarash will understand it based on what is explained in the Mameorim of the Rebbe Maharash. So over there, he discusses the idea that a shofar on one side is narrow and the other side is wide. Now, if you're going to try to blow from the wide side, you can't blow. It means that it has to come from narrow side. It has to come from the Meitzar in order to get the response by Merchav to come out from the large side of the shofar. So the Rebbe Maharash in the Mameorim says, the fact that one side of the shofar is narrow, and the other side of the shofar is wide, hu al shem. This is based on the idea of what it says, min ha-meitzar korosu yutke, anoni b'merchav yutke. We say, I call out to Hashem from meitzar, from my distress. And Hashem answers me b'merchav, in a wide way. Anoni b'merchav yutke. So this is the similar idea of the shofar. Narrow brings wide. Min ha-meitzar brings merchav. The kamoy shekoil ha-shofar. Just as the sound of the shofar. Al yidei sheyoytze min ha-meitzar. The shofar sound by going from the narrow, mitzid ha-kotzer, from the squeezed, um, squeezed side, the short side, the narrow side. That's the way it ends up in the wide and in an expanded way in the wide side of the shofar. Likewise, it's also spiritually. When a person cries out to Hashem from being squeezed, for being in a difficult area, from the Meitzar call Yudke, that's the way we get the response. Just as the shofar, to get the coil, we need to go to this narrow side, and we get the wide side to make the sound. The same thing is, we get Hashem's response Dafke when it's min ha-meitzar, when we call out Hashem min ha-meitzar. So what does it mean min ha-meitzar? It says, doesn't need to mean really squeeze, but in yourself. That's a level of humility that you should be in a way of considering yourself and being narrow. So explain, this is what our sages tell us. That kol shono sherosha b'tchiloso misasheres b'soifa. That every year that is poor, in the beginning it starts off on a way of being poor, lacking, then it gets rich at the end. What does it mean that it's poor in the beginning? It doesn't mean literally to be lacking, but we mean a sense of poor, a sense of humility. The Rasha b'tchiloso, what does it mean if it starts Rasha b'tchiloso? In other words, if you're on the Meitzar, if you make yourself like the Meitzar, she Yisrael, Oisim Atzmam Roshim B'Rosh Hashanah. Yidden make themselves poor on Rosh Hashanah. L'daber tachnunim v'tfilah, because we speak in a way of beseeching and prayer. The way we daven in, because it's different. The davening of a person who thinks he has or who has everything, he doesn't daven with beseeching and real prayer. But we daven with tachanunim, with begging and prayer. As we say, as poor person, the pasuk says speaks tachanunim, and we daven in a way of Rosh. That means Rosh b'tchiloso, that we are approaching, and Rosh Hashanah we are making ourselves as Roshim poor, and we daven in such a way of beseeching. That is the call that comes from a Meitzah, because we are Roshim. That's where you get rich at the end, where the Rizal say, Rosh b'tchilos misasheres b'soifa. He becomes rich. That is the Anoni b'merchav. Okay, Mavuer, b'maimer hanal shel Admor Maharash, as explained in the above maimer of the Rebbe Maharash, hamayle the tfilas oni al tfilas osher. The advantage of the prayer of the poor person more than the prayer of the wealthy. What is the advantage? So the Rebbe says this advantage, both the prayer is a beseeching, is a more heartfelt, is a more prayer for Hashem with the heart. and also the results are the delight that the poor person gets from the response is a greater delight. ויש לומר, שהמיילה בתפילת העוני תוזוני בשני עניונים. The advantage of the prayer of the poor person is into two aspects. Batfila atzma, in the prayer itself. Ketoiras habal shem tov al haposik, the prayer of a poor person has an advantage. Baal Shem Tov says on the posik, Tefillah la'oni ki yatev v'lifnei Hashem yishpech sichei. So literally we're learning when the ani prays, wraps himself around in prayer, and when he pours himself out his talk before Hashem, if it's a situation, that's the Pashtup Shah. But the Baal Shem Tov teaches that what the ani is praying is so that he should be able to pour his yishpech sichei, that the tefillah sa'onihi, that the prayer of the poor person is lifnei havaya yishpech sichei, that he should be able before Hashem to pour out his talk, to give his prayer to Hashem. But also, and also the tefillah sa'onim is kabbalas yosef is also accepted for. That's one area. The inyan shegam hatainug deha'odom mehashpo shenimshach aloi al dei tefilosei. The second aspect is that the delight that the person receives from the flow that was given to him through his davening, the tainug of the poor person is a greater delight. As the teaching of the Rav Magid is brought down in the Maimer. So the prayer of the Oni, min ha-meitzar, Rosho b'tchiloso, and the prayer has two advantages. First of all, you are pouring out, you're praying, and you're pouring out your heart to Hashem. And then the light that you get from the response is in a much greater way. So So now we can explain the connection of this blowing and this great shofar to Rosh Hashanah. Why is it that in the future to come there will be the shofar Gadol that will wake up even those lost and those who've been nidochim, who ki ha'ovdim v'hanidochim heim betachlis ha'meitzah. Because the ovdim and nidochim are in the total meitzar, they're in the total squeezed place, they're in total limitations and boundaries, and they're caught up and they're in a difficult situation. So that wakes up, that arouses, and that draws down the Tkiya the Shefer Gadol. So it's not like it's coming totally by itself. It comes by itself because of the condition. From the level of hidden, of all hidden, Tachlis HaMerchav, it comes down in the total wide way. That's the Tzad HaRochev of the Shofar, the response, Tachlis HaMerchav. The Yitaka b'Shofar Gadol Rosh Hashanah, and this is the connection of the Shofar Gadol Rosh Hashanah Tiku b'Chayde Shofar, which the Shofar we connected Ki Inyan Rosh Hashanah Da'idei Shirosha B'Tchilosa, because that's what Rosh Hashanah is. That through being Rosha B'Tchilosa in the beginning, in that level of poor Rosha, in the level of that humility. Mereshis Hashon, Mereshis Choser. In the pasuk, when it says from the beginning to the end, and the Reshis is missing the Aleph, it's Reshis Choser showing on a level of missing, of poor, of being lacking. He misasheres, that brings the wealth. So the wealth that we get from the Shofar Gadol comes because of the situation that we're in a level of Russia, poor in the beginning, and that's how we get to the other, to the level to get to the min hameitzer karosi or noni b'merchav, which is the idea that the Shofar Gadol responds to the oni, and then the Avdim and Nidachim, which are squeezed, and that's ends up getting you the Shefer God. Oizvov. So the Rebbe is going to continue to say that when we encourage the Ovdim and the Nidachim that are in Asher and Mitzrayim, we actually elevate Asher and Mitzrayim as well. And then that's also the purpose of Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is not only about man, but to impact the entire world. But v'yesh loymar da'idei ha'tkiya b'shofer godel b'chdei la'orer es ha'ovdim be'eretz Asher v'hanidochim be'eretz Mitzrayim. In order that through this tkiya with the great shofar, which is done in order to arouse and wake up the lost in the land of Asher and those pushed away in the land of Mitzrayim, Nase ilu gam beretz Asher veretz Mitzrayim. That brings about an elevation so that Asher and Eretz Mitzrayim become elevated. Because the purpose of Asher and Eretz Mitzrayim were to provide the challenge for the Nidochim and the Ovdim. They shouldn't become Nidochim and Ovdim, but there's a challenging place. And when they fail, and then you bring them back, then you're fulfilling the purpose of Ashur and Mitzrayim. Let's look inside. Kakavona Bazeshi Yisrael Golu Eretz Ashur Eretz Mitzrayim. What was the purpose, the intent for the Yidden going to the land of Ashur and the land of Mitzrayim? And in this case, by going there, they became lost and Midachim. So the purpose was that is in order through this meitzer of the golus, this squeeze and the limitation of the golus, the challenges, ubefrat meitzer hagolus shel elo, especially those whose the golus squeezed them to the point that they turned into Avdim and Nidachim. Elu Shalidei HaGolus Nase b'matziv the Avdim and Nidachim. They became the condition of they're lost and they're pushed away. Yis'oider v'yumshach HaShefer Godel. So that should awake and extend this great Shefer. Sha'al Yidei Zed Yis'alu Yisrael, through this, through going through the Golus, through going through that Meitzah, through going through the difficulties in Asher and Mitzrayim, they are elevated to a higher level than the level they were before they exiled. V'lochein, כשיתקע בשופר גדול, על ידי זה יסעלו ישרול למדרגה נייליס יויסר מהמדרגה שהיה קודם שגלו, so we come to a higher level, ולכן כשיתקע בשופר גדול, ותושלם הכוונה שבשבילו נברא ארץ אשור וארץ מצרים, and then the purpose for which Eretz Asher and Eretz Mitzrayim were created to begin with. Now, in order to bring the Ovdim and Nidachim to a higher level. And now that they got to the higher level, it will be Yishotoko B'Shefer Gadol, Tiyaliyah Gam Bahem, so they will have the elevation because now they fulfilled and they completed their mission. And this is connected to Rosh Hashanah, where the elevations that is by the human, by the Adam, actually that later on gets transmitted also to the world, because the Zehayoim, Pilas Masecho, actually brings an elevation in all of creation. The yitaka b'shefer Gdol l'Rosh Hashanah, the connection between blowing with this great shefer to Rosh Hashanah, that is the same idea. Before we talked about that Rosh Hashanah is Rosh b'tchilosa, Sasheres b'soifa, Reishis Choser Aleph, that the fact min ha-meitzar, and that's also the Nidochim Avdim bring about the Yitaka b'Shefer Gdol. There's another idea here, a connection of Yitaka b'Shefer Gdol to Rosh Hashanah. Ki b'Rosh Hashanah shnei inyonim. Because in Rosh Hashanah we have both inyonim. First, Shehu Yoim Brias Adam, that it's the day of man's creation. V'ashal Yidei Zeh, and through man's creation, Nasi Ilui, also, there becomes an elevation in all of creation in generally, as now the Rebbe will explain. So, will the same thing is the Ashur and the Mitzrayim will be elevated when Nidochim and the Eivdim Ubou vishtachvu through the Shefer Godel. You know, Kameshkos, Vadmur Marsham Nishmos Eiden Bamaimer, Dibra Maschil, Zayim Tchilas Masecha Zekarnim Rish, and the Maimer from the Rebbe Rashab that opens up with the same verse, Zayim Tchilas Masecha Zekarnim Rish. The Tzorich Lahavin Hararesh Hashanah Zeh Hayoim Hu Bechad B'Tishrei. So Rosh Hashanah, which we're saying Zeh Hayoim, this is the day. That's really on the first day of Tishrei. Shu Yom Hashishel Ma'aseh Bereshis. It's the sixth day of creation. So how is this a remembrance for the first day, which was on the Chof Hei Elul? Oh, this is not the same day. That the desire to create the world, that's the external desire. That's not the real desire of Hashem. The real desire of Hashem, He created a world not for Chof Hei Elul, but for Rosh Hashanah, for the human being. The inner will is for the Yid. These two aspects of Chitzoni Sarotzen, the Pnimis Sarotzen, Bismane Hashana, as it is in the times of the years, Heim B'Chof Hei Elul Rosh Hashanah, on the 25th of Elul and Rosh Hashanah. The B'Chof Hei Elul Shavei Nivra Olam Hu Chitzoni Sarotzen. On the 25th of Elul, which the world was created, that's the external will. But on Rosh Hashanah, in which man was created, and that was the Panimi Sarotzen Atem Kruim Adam. And even though it's Adam, all mankind, but Yidden are called Adam, so that means the Rotzen in Yidden, who Panimi Sarotzen. And this is what it means, the Pasik, that is Tchilas Masecha, and as accordingly in Risha. The Beresh Hashanah Shnei Yonim. Inyan ha'ikri the Rosh Hashanah, the main thing of Rosh Hashanah hu tchilas masecha, that this is the beginning of the Eberster's actions, which means hamshachas atzmus eidin sof shelamayla merotzen la'olam mois aidei avedis odom, that we're bringing down the beginning, the bringing down the atzmus eidin sof, which is higher than the rotzen for the olam through the service of men. So that's tchilas masecha. And then there's another idea in Rosh Hashanah, that it remembers the first day, Chofei El, Sham Shocha, the Asmus Erisof, Nimsheches Gam Baharotzin, the Bria Soilom. Also the Chitzonis Rotzen, also in the Rotzen Bria Soilom. So from the Rotzen to Bria Soilom, then in the world. So the connection to Rosh Hashanah is the two areas of Rosh Hashanah. We have now Rosh Hashanah as it impacts Yidden, then we have it impacts the world, so the Hamshachas Agilu the Shefer Godel Yisrael Shayachas Atchilas Masecha. the bringing down the Gilu of the Shefer Godel for the Yidden, that's Tchilas Masecha, that's connected to the Rotzen for the Yidden. And then through this, that we becomes the elevation in Ashur Eretz Mitzrayim, that is Shayich Lizikon Liyom Rishon, that is connected to remembrance, to Chofei Elul, to the remembrance of the Chitzonius Haratzon, which is the Zikon Liyom Rishon, and that's going to be accomplished that Ashur and Mitzrayim themselves will be elevated.